Election day is November 5th, but it's very possible that we won't know who won the presidency or the balance of power in Congress until later than that. So how long could it take to know those answers to those questions, and why might it be taking a while? David Becker is the executive director of the Center for Election Innovation and Research. David, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Austin.
Absolutely. So no one has a crystal ball, of course, but which battleground states and/or counties will likely take longer to tabulate results? For example, I know Maricopa County in Arizona has been known to have a slower process because it has a big population.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think first we have to set the stage and understand we all want to know who wins the election right away. That's completely understandable. It's the most American thing possible. But it's always taken long to count ballots. We just don't realize it because the margins used to be much wider in a lot of these races. And now the election is going to be very, very close. We're going to have to wait to count more and more ballots until the media has enough ballots to say with certainty that one or the other presidential candidate won, and actually much longer than that to know who controls, for instance, the House of Representatives, because that's likely to come down to some very, very close races in places like California. So with regard to the presidential swing states, I think some of the presidential swing states that are going to count ballots pretty fast because of the way people vote and because of the way that those state laws allow them to process ballots, particularly mail ballots, early, that allows them to report them sooner. So Georgia, I think, will be among the very first swing states to report out. I think North Carolina and Michigan will report out pretty early. Michigan changed its laws to allow mail ballots to be processed earlier so that they can be reported out earlier on election night. States like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin are going to take longer, and that's because state laws in those states, Pennsylvania has a split legislature, Wisconsin has a Republican legislature, require that mail ballots cannot be processed until election day. So that's going to take some time, and I would expect we won't learn about the final results, the final unofficial results, until Wednesday, Thursday, or perhaps Friday, depending on how narrow that margin is and whether it can be called. Nevada and Arizona are both interesting. They both have a lot of mail voting in both of those states. That's a culture of mail voting that's been around for decades in those states. But a lot of people return those mail ballots on the very last day. And if you return a mail ballot on the very last day, it's going to take some time to verify the envelope, make sure it's coming from the right person before it gets counted. So that could take a few days. It really has nothing to do with the laws there. It's more because the culture is to return those mail ballots late on election day.
We just saw a tweet up on screen from Fox 6 Milwaukee's Ben Handelman. He says, expect a long election night in Milwaukee because with the city of Milwaukee about to surpass 80,000 early voters, the election commissioner says that she expects counting to go into the early morning hours. She says counting to 2 to 3 a.m. is likely. Unfortunately, misinformation has become a common discussion around all of this. David, what are we hearing and what do we need to know about misinformation as it relates to this year's election and the length it'll take to know the results?
Well, we should understand that the people who are counting our ballots, these are public servants. They're observers from both parties and both campaigns in all of these counting centers, making sure it's going as it's supposed to. And so there's nothing wrong going on. It's not like the counting is taking longer than it has before. It's just the margins are so narrow, we've got to count longer. And I think a lot of us are concerned, especially election officials, that a candidate, especially a candidate who might think they're losing, might cast some doubt about what's going on during this normal counting process as if there's something nefarious going on. There isn't. It's really just the margin of victory. Wisconsin is always very close. If you remember in 2022, the Democratic governor won re-election and the Republican senator won re-election, both in very close races on the very, very same ballot. And you're going to need to count all the ballots to get to that. Counter that to California, for instance, where California is going to take some time to count ballots as well. It's going to take a long time to know who won some of those U.S. House races. But I expect California to be called very early in the night, even though they haven't counted most of their ballots. And that's because the margin of victory is likely to be quite large in the presidential race in California.
Yeah, we're looking at some of those areas in the Central Valley of California, specifically very, very tight races, and it's very possible we may not know for days or weeks in some of those cases, from what I understand. One more thing I got to ask you, since you work at an organization that focuses on election innovation, I got to know, is there any technology in the pipeline that aims to make this process smoother and quicker in future elections?
So there are ways to do this, and it's not really technology, it's more processes, because honestly, we want to have the paper ballots that we have, and 97% of all voters are voting on paper ballots. Those paper ballots are really important because it means we can audit and recount and confirm the technology worked correctly. Georgia has all paper ballots. That's great. If they need to recount or audit those votes, we can be absolutely sure of the results. Paper takes a little bit longer to process, though, just to make sure we get it right. But also, Georgia has shown there's a way forward. I think Georgia is one of the best states to do this, as well as Florida, to be honest, where they allow for a lot of early voting, a lot of mail voting. They allow for election officials to begin verifying and processing those mail ballots as quickly as possible, and then build systems that allow that reporting to come out as quickly as possible. Those are the best practices. But even then, if a state is decided by just a few hundred votes, really doesn't matter how fast or how well a state reports those results out. It's still going to take days or maybe even weeks to resolve an election that close.
All right. David Becker is the executive director for the Center for Election Innovation and Research. Nice talking to you. Talk soon.
Talking to you. Thanks.